Something disappeared on the internet. Not a channel, not a person, a soul, and nobody noticed until it was already gone. Let me paint you a picture. It's 2013. Somewhere in Austin, Texas, a balding guy in his mom's attic is recording a World of Warcraft guide. No ring light, no script, no brand deal. Just a guy who genuinely, embarrassingly loves a video game, talking into a camera like he's explaining something to a friend who asked. And here's the thing. He was kinda good at it. Not good in the polished, algorithmic, everything is optimized way that YouTube would eventually reward. Good in the rarer, harder to manufacture sense. He respected your time. You clicked on a video about farming gold in midst of Pandaria. You got exactly what you needed. And you left. No padding, no 10-minute intro, no fake hype. Just a guy who knew the game inside and out and wanted to share it. His name was Zack. Most people knew him as Asmongold. And for a specific breed of nerdy, socially awkward, chronically online kid, he was, weirdly, a role model. Now, I know how that sounds, but bear with me here. The thing about the early internet, and specifically the early gaming internet, is that success had a very specific face. You had to be funny in a practiced way, or conventionally attractive, or polished in some direction. There was a template, and then there was Asmongold, a balding, eccentric, hygienically questionable man streaming from a room that looked like it had failed a health inspection twice, eating little Debbie cakes out of boxes that almost certainly had something living underneath them. And he didn't apologize for any of it, didn't perform self-awareness about it. It just was. When you're a teenager getting bullied, watching someone succeed completely on their own weird terms does something to you. It rearranges something in the chest. It says the template is optional. You can just be what you are all the way, no apologies, and that might actually be enough. And his audience felt it. Really felt it, because authenticity, genuine, unperformed, slightly gross authenticity, is one of the rarest things the internet has ever produced. And audiences have an almost biological sensitivity to it. They can smell the difference between someone being real and someone performing realness. Asmongold was real. The Warlords of Draenor era brought a 14-month content drought to World of Warcraft. The game was dying, slowly, publicly, and streamers started pivoting to just talking, just being on camera, and Asmongold turned out to be extraordinary at it. Not because he was eloquent or particularly wise, but because he had this quality of total unguarded presence. When something frustrated him, you felt it. When he was genuinely excited, it radiated off the screen. He wasn't performing reactions, he was having them. By the time Legion dropped in 2016, widely considered one of the best expansions the game ever saw, Asmongold was at his absolute peak. He was hosting Mount Offs where hundreds of players would congregate in-game just to be near him. He could look at a pixel art piece of armor and tell you which boss dropped it in 2004. He was the kind of person who understood his world so completely that being around him made the world feel more knowable, more alive. He was the literal god. And it wasn't arrogance, it was just accurate. That era, 2015 to 2018, was something genuinely beautiful. Not perfect, nothing is, but real. There was a warmth underneath the degeneracy, a generosity. When his chat spammed racist emotes, he didn't play it dumb or hedge. He looked dead into the camera and said, "You know exactly what you're doing." And then he banned them. When transphobia crept into his community, he shut it down the same way. One warning, then gone. That was the actual man. That was what people loved. And then, somewhere between Shadowlands and the Johnny Depp trial, something changed. Or maybe it didn't change all at once. Maybe it happened so gradually that nobody could point to the exact moment. That's usually how it goes, isn't it? The things that matter most don't announce themselves. They just quietly become past tense. Shadowlands launched in 2020 and it was bad. Not bad like a disappointing meal, bad like a promise broken slowly over 18 months. Time-gated mechanics, repetitive systems, a story that seemed to actively resent the lore it was built on. It broke a lot of people's relationships with the game, mine included, and it broke Asmongold's too. The difference is what he replaced it with. When the game stopped feeding him, he pivoted, first to reaction content, then to drama, then, almost imperceptibly at first, to politics. And not politics in the thoughtful, nuanced, this is complicated sense. Politics in the engagement maximizing, outrage is a revenue stream sense. Take the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial. Most people watched a few clips, formed a vague opinion, and moved on. Asmongold made approximately 87 videos on it. 87. Roughly 80 hours of footage. 2 full working weeks of one man reacting to 2 people publicly describing the worst moments of their lives. Almost none of those videos got fewer than 500,000 views. He made millions of dollars off that trial alone. And then he spent almost none of it. He has said himself in interviews that he probably spends less than 1% of what he earns. He doesn't buy cars or watches. He orders fast food and plays games for 12 hours a day. Which is fine, it's his money. But there's a texture to this that matters. Because this is also the man who went a month and a half without showering, who meticulously documented, by the way, across years of uploads, a house that looked like a crime scene that had been left to marinate. There's a story he told once about his bathtub. He was sick, got ill in his shower, and left it. Months later, there was a smell. A rich hickory-smoked barbecue kind of smell. When they finally replaced the shower curtain, they discovered the bottom of it had melted into the oxidized material underneath, which was the source of that aroma. He told this story on camera without visible distress. Now, and this is where it gets genuinely philosophically interesting, not just grotesque, there is something almost coherent in it. He has said with complete sincerity that he lives like an animal, doesn't treat his body like a temple, treats it like a zoo. He doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, no drugs, knows his family history and keeps that door locked. But he replaces those vices with pure environmental entropy and 12-hour gaming sessions. There's a kind of internal logic to a man who accumulates enormous wealth and then refuses to let it change a single thing about his life. Something almost monastic about it, if you squint. Vows of poverty, except the poverty is chosen and the monastery is full of cockroaches. But here's where the coherence collapses, because the same man who lives in performative, almost philosophical squalor began building a media identity around the idea that certain cultures, certain people, are inferior, that immigration is an infection, that children in the bottom percentile of test scores should be sent to coal mines instead of school. These are not hypotheticals. These are direct quotes. And the audience that formed around this content, the subreddit, the ecosystem, became something genuinely dark. Somewhere between 2020 and now, the community calcified around a specific kind of identity, perpetually aggrieved, allergic to nuance, organized around cultural enemies more than any actual shared interest. Studies now show prolonged exposure to hate speech literally deteriorates gray matter. It rewires the emotional brain toward threat detection, toward tribal identification, away from anything resembling curiosity or warmth. Whatever was left of the warm, communal gaming space got hollowed out from the inside. And the streaming numbers, his alt account, not even his main monetized channel, pulls 26,000 concurrent viewers daily, operating completely unmonetized. He's the 7th largest channel on the platform. Twitch is reportedly hemorrhaging close to $3 million a year just on bandwidth costs to host him. He's a force of nature by pure metric. But metrics aren't meaning. The subreddit that used to trade bald jokes and fan memes now regularly surface as far-right propaganda in the top posts. 47% right-leaning, 0% left, 69% of top posts engaging in overt bigotry, 79% built around a scapegoat, only 3%. 7 posts over weeks of tracking, were by any measure, just nice. 7. Here is the question that I ask myself continuously. Is any of this intentional? There's a theory, and it's seductive, that Asmongold is performing, that he's smart enough to know exactly what he's doing, that the edgy politics are a character, that he's essentially a comedian playing a villain to see how far he can push it before the whole thing implodes. It would explain a lot, the consistency of his self-sabotage, the almost artistic dedication to being wrong in public, the way he engages with controversy like a man who is deeply personally unbothered. I want this theory to be true. It's a more comfortable universe to live in. But then you watch him refuse to debate anyone. He has endless time to react to Hassan Piker or Destiny, endless hours, enormous audience, but he will not sit across from either of them and engage with their actual arguments. He pre-watches response videos off stream, figures out where he has no real counter, and then performs watching them live so he can safely navigate around the hard parts. That's not a comedian playing with fire. That's a man protecting something. And then there's the Bardman response. A huge shout out to Bardman, by the way. Bardman made a meticulous hour-long video dismantling Asmongold's positions on DEI and affirmative action. Asmongold's stated reason for not engaging with it: too long, my audience will zone out. He then made a 1-hour response to a 16-minute follow-up. He used an AI summary of the video to check whether Bardman had called him racist. The AI said, "No, but he argued your statements were racist." Asmongold treated this as a complete victory. This is what psychologists call motivated reasoning. You build the conclusion first, then construct the path backward. You're not looking for truth, you're looking for confirmation. And an audience of hundreds of thousands watches you do it in real time and absorbs the methodology. There's a line attributed to the philosopher Hannah Arendt. She was writing about something much larger, much darker than streaming drama, but it applies here. About the danger of people who never think, not people who think badly, people who simply stop doing it, who outsource it entirely to a tribe, a team, a narrative. The banality isn't in malice, it's in the absence of reflection. And that's what the modern Asmongold looks like to me. Not a villain with a plan, a man who found that incuriosity is profitable and stopped there, which is somehow sadder. Because here's what the old clips tell you. He was curious about the game, about the people in it, about why things worked the way they did. That curiosity was the engine of everything good he ever made. The guides that didn't waste your time, the community events that felt alive, the moments when he'd look into the camera during something genuinely unfair and just say the real thing without hedging. That person existed. This isn't revisionist nostalgia. The clips are still out there. Go watch the classic WoW launch stream. 20 consecutive hours. Raw, joyful, completely unself-conscious. Watch him respond to transphobia in his chat with zero equivocation. Watch him be, however briefly, exactly as real as it seemed. The tragedy isn't that he became bad, it's that he became smaller. He treated a world that was genuinely large, a community, a game, a decade of human connection, for a feedback loop that tells him he's right about everything. And the feedback loop is always happy to oblige. Meanwhile, the community he leaves behind, the young men, particularly the lonely ones, to be told that being weird and unpolished and honest was survivable. Those guys are still there, and some of them are getting the opposite message now. Not you can be yourself and win, but everyone else is the reason you're losing. Steve Bannon understood something early and said it plainly. If you want to change politics, change culture first. Gamergate in 2014 was the proof of concept. An organized harassment campaign against women in gaming, retroactively branded as ethics journalism, recruited a generation of politically unaware guys into an ideology by making them feel like the victims of something. The IRC logs are public, the origin story is documented, but the recruitment keeps working because the emotional pitch is timeless. You're not struggling because of complex systemic forces, you're struggling because they are in your way. It's a lie that feels like clarity, and clarity is deeply comfortable when everything else is noise. Now, I don't hate Asmongold. I'm not even sure I even fully blame him. The machine he faced is bigger than him. The incentives that shaped him aren't unique to him. 1,000 smaller versions of the same story are playing out on 1,000 smaller channels right now. But I do grieve something. Because there was a person, a genuinely strange, genuinely warm, completely unashamed person who once told an entire generation of weird kids that they didn't have to be anything other than what they were. And then he became what the algorithm wanted him to be instead. That's not a fall from grace. Grace implies something elevated to begin with. This is simpler and worse. This is a man who had something real and exchanged it incrementally for numbers. The old clips are still out there, the literal God years. Go watch them sometime if you have the interest in it, and then come back to the present and notice what's missing. You'll feel it immediately.